Core to any of our strategies is collaboration, and tonight is a really great example of that as we are working with Natural Capitalism Solutions, Savory Institute, the Presidential Climate Action Project, Daniels College of Business at the Epicenter, Change Finance, Institute for the Built Environment at Colorado State University, and New Resource Bank to bring to you our new program series, Cultivating an Economy in Service to Life. The current economic system values people and nature only to the extent that they serve economic activity. It is out of sync with what science tells us humans want and need to flourish, and it does not serve the tenets of sustainability. We are living and working in an economic narrative that no longer serves the needs of our time. Imagine for me, just for a moment, that you live in a world that is truly healthy, where people have a sense of belonging and security, where the economy nurtures biological and cultural diversity, where human activities support natural systems and processes. Ecosystems are healthy and provide services that enhance our quality of life. In this world, all forms of capital would be honored and counted holistically. There would be no externalities. What economic system might deliver this shared well-being on a healthy planet? And how would this change our communities, our business, our finance and commerce? The catalyst in this paradigm shift is transforming our current economic narrative, which drives our global systems. Cultivating an Economy in Service to Life is a program series of the Alliance for Sustainable Colorado in collaboration with our esteemed advisory board, the organizations that I mentioned earlier. And we have many of our advisors here tonight, so if I might ask you to stand, please, and recognize, I would really love that. You know who you are, don't make me call you out. Bruce, Kim, so thank you so much for your time. These advisors, in addition to their personal lives, their work lives, everything else they've got going on, they work with me closely to create the program you're seeing and experiencing tonight, and the programs that will be rolling out into 2017. So thank you, advisors. I really appreciate all of your help. Working with these advisors, the Alliance will host a series of programs, workshops, and summits to raise awareness of regenerative concepts and the current economic paradigm that we have on our planet. The program will engage local community in action-oriented solutions and promote regenerative principles across Colorado. Cultivating an Economy in Service to Life is a series of programs that build the concepts. It's not just one standalone event tonight. This work is not done when we leave this evening. So some upcoming events in the program series to stay tuned for are the Roadmap to the Future We Want in January. How do we apply regenerative principles to create, as Bill Becker calls it, the finer future? In February, we'll explore building regenerative economy using anchor institutions and anchor tenants. In March, we'll look at well-being and finance. In May, we're collaborating with several groups locally to have a Regenerative Future Summit to explore regenerative economic principles and how they apply in a regional setting while rolling out a new economic narrative that promotes shared well-being on a healthy planet. Later next year, we'll be exploring impact investing, as well as the three divides and the intersection between economic, ecological, and social issues, disconnects, problems, and their solutions. To find out more, please visit our website at sustainablecolorado.com. You'll find a lot more information about what this program is, who we're working with, what are upcoming events, and a great resource reading list for you to reference if you're curious for more. Tonight on your table, we also do have a handout that we're calling the Key Concepts paper. I encourage you to review that during our group conversation. Take it home tonight. Share it with your family, your friends, your community. And while this is not an exhaustive document, it does outline a lot of the foundational knowledge that we need to start to explore these concepts in depth. The Alliance, I have to say, is not alone in this work. There are thousands working all over the planet right now to bring this paradigm shift to fruition and transform the international economic narrative. I thank you for joining us on this epic and very important journey. Tonight, we're going to be exploring the difference between, very simply, degenerative, sustaining, and regenerative principles. And that might sound easy to say in one sentence, but I think as we get into these conversations, we'll have some really great exploration as a group as to the nuances between those terms, because there are a lot of differences that we need to illustrate and use to build our future. Hunter Lovins will take the stage next and take the next 30 minutes to explain and take us on a journey of how we got where we got with our current economic narrative, why it was created, how it was created, and what's in store for us in the future as we apply regenerative principles to our economy. So during the group session, Jeff and Hunter will give you a lot more information, and I'll be floating around the room helping as well. And then to close off the evening, we'll be hearing from some inspirational stories from local leaders. We'll be hearing from Kim Kupanis, who's the director of B-Lab Colorado, and Trey Katz, who's the COO of Savory Institute, to explore some regenerative practices in action right here in our home state. And Jeff and Hunter will wrap up the evening with some concluding remarks. Lastly, I want to say a big thank you to New Resource Bank, who is our program sponsor this evening. Without their support, we could not do this work. So thank you, New Resource Bank.
Welcome to the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene. The folk who set geologic eras have now said we have left the Holocene, which was the geologic era when we were all born. We now live in the Anthropocene, where we humans are the dominant geologic force on the planet. We're changing the chemistry of the oceans, the chemistry of the atmosphere, the geology itself. Stuart Brand once said, "We are as gods and had better get good at it." Study released a year and a bit ago, funded by NASA, inquiring into collapse throughout human history. It found that collapse is actually fairly common. It happens when one or both of two things occur. You overrun your resource base or you have high levels of inequality. Hello. We are exceeding the planetary boundaries. We're failing to meet the human minimums. This is work by Dr. Kate Raworth at Oxford. She is calling for donut economics, that sweet spot below the boundaries but above the human minimums. Well, we're not there yet. Oxfam, this number is actually obsolete. It's now 62 people have as much wealth as the 3.5 billion poorest. 1% has now as much wealth as all the rest of human population. And the Handy study concluded that under conditions closely reflecting the reality of the world today, we find that collapse is difficult to avoid. For some people, collapse is upon us. The floods in 2010 in Bangladesh displaced 20 million people. The north of Africa, this is the Dadaab refugee camp. There are now 65 million people on the move. This is 13 times the population of Colorado. It's about the same as all the children in the United States. Think about that for a moment. Every child in the United States displaced. Where will they go? And they are displaced because of failed states, largely failing because of the impact of climate change, exacerbated by all of the old ethnic and religious tensions. This is not going to get any better anytime soon. You may have been seeing in the news they're dismantling the Calais camp in France. Nobody wants these people, and yet they're all on the move. Sir John Beddington, chief scientist of the UK, pointed out that the unsustainability of the way we now do business is what drove the 2008 collapse, and that if we don't change it, we will lurch from collapse to collapse to collapse. The 2008 collapse was bad enough. $50 trillion gone. 80 million jobs evaporated. Shortly thereafter, the central bankers in Europe released a nice piece in the FT, said, "We don't fully understand what's happening to advanced economies." If they don't, who does? Well, then the FT figured it out. It's us, it's you, you're not buying enough stuff. And after 9/11, Mr. Bush said, "Go shopping." He was actually right. If in an economic collapse, you act as if nothing's happened, economically, nothing's happened. Well, maybe we're buying the wrong stuff. What we spend on makeup would provide reproductive health care for the world around. What we spend on bottled water would buy clean water 3 times over for the whole world. And is this making us happier? Ellen Goodman said normal's getting dressed in clothes you buy for work and driving through traffic in a car you're still paying for in order to get to the job you need to pay for the clothes and the car and the house you leave vacant all day so that you can afford to live in it. But it's not making us happier. GDP, gross domestic product, continues to go up, but happiness is flatlining. I like this cartoon from the New Yorker. What would you suggest to fill the dark, empty spaces in my soul? It's called shopping therapy, and it doesn't work. So, can we get out of this mess? Mandela said poverty is not an accident. We made it. The good news is we can unmake it. I've been arguing with Thomas Berry, the great theologian, that we need a new story. Barry said we're in trouble because we don't have a good story. The old story told us who we were, what our job was, what our place in society was. And that old story isn't working anymore. So how did we get here? What was that old story and how was it created? It turns out it was built by 36 men, yeah, they were all men, who got together at the Montpellier Hotel outside Montreux, Switzerland in 1947 to argue. They argued for 10 days about the intellectual foundations of what was then called neoliberalism after a man named Walter Lippmann. They put forth an ideology that personal freedom is paramount, government is evil, markets are perfect, the individual is the only legitimate economic actor. Now, remember, 1947, Europe is in ruins. So Ludwig von Mises was appalled at what National Socialism had just done in trashing Europe. Friedrich Hayek was terrified of the rise in the East of Soviet collectivism. And Milton Friedman believed that the individual was the only legitimate economic actor. They really believed government should be small. If government gets any bigger, it'll just cause mischief. That government has 3 functions: military defense, enforce contracts, i.e. protect private property, and protect citizens from internal violence. That's the job of government, full stop. They formed a society, the Montpellier Society. They got their members as advisors to every head of state on the planet, 3 of them as heads of state, many of them as central bankers, founded the Chicago School of Economics. If you've had an economics class, the stuff's in your head. You have been told this is how the economy works and should work. They used the economics Nobel to legitimize their ideology. Quite unrelated, in 1971, a man named Lewis Powell was asked by the US Chamber of Commerce to explain how business could deal with the fact that the college campuses were in flames, the communists were winning, the students were all going over to the left. Remember those days, any of you? I highly recommend you go online, download, and read the Powell Memorandum. It is chilling. He laid out 26 targets that business and the chamber should seek to influence. Campuses, because that was their great concern. They needed to transform education, public media, press, TV, books, the political arena, courts, stockholders, discredit the old ideology. Remember, coming out of World War II, government had pretty fair legitimacy. It had fought and won freedom for the world. Prior to that, it had put in place the New Deal. The US put in place the Marshall Plan, and we rebuilt Europe and Japan. These guys believe the role of government is to be drowned in a bathtub. They, on the strength of the Powell Memorandum, a bunch of foundations, Olin, Coors, Scaife, Bradley, the Koch brothers, put something like $5 million apiece for 5 years into building the intellectual architecture. Hudson, Heritage, Hoover, American Enterprise, Cato. They built ALEC. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected in this country, Margaret Thatcher in the UK, and they won. This became the dominant global economic narrative. The following years saw deregulation in essentially every industry, followed by the various accounting scandals, Enron, and ultimately the 2008 collapse. Prior to 1980, inequality was disappearing. All classes were coming up together. After 1980, only the 1%. Because the belief of the neoliberals is that we are essentially greedy. We care only about money, and success is determined by how much money you have. It's right that the rich have money. They're rich. Don't give money to the poor. They're poor. They don't spend it well. So now the bonuses of the bankers would double, just the bonuses, never mind their daily paycheck, would double the minimum wage of everybody working at the minimum wage. Just the bonuses. Is this who we are? Is greed good? Do you believe that? A man named Paul Lawrence, a scientist who studies human behavior, says we have 4 drives. Yes, we have a drive to acquire, we have a drive to defend. The neolibs were right about that. But he said we have 2 other drives as well. The drive to bond. When humans came down out of the trees in Africa, we were naked, our claws aren't worth much, our teeth are pretty inadequate. How did we survive? We survived because we bonded. And says Lawrence, in your DNA, because you're here, because you are the survivors, is this drive to bond, that it is inherent in who we are now as human beings. And he said we have a drive to comprehend, this big brain of ours. We're creative, we're inventive, we love to solve puzzles. Mandela said, social equality is the only basis of human happiness. So I think what we are challenged with now is looking at that old story and building a new one. Here's the old story. We, people, the planet, are in service to the economy, which is in service to finance. We are really good at flowing money to the top. What's wrong with this picture? It's wrong way round. Finance is a tool to bring liquidity, money, to the real economy, which ought to be in service to life. So this concept of an economy in service to life, shared well-being on a healthy planet, is, we think, the basis of a new narrative. Where are we going? A lot of us have talked a lot about sustainability. Is sustainability what we want? John Fullerton of Capital Institute argues that what we need is a regenerative economy, following on Bill Reed's observation, great green architect, that nature is sustainable not because it's set out to be, but because it's regenerative. He has laid out 8 principles of what a regenerative economy would be. And I highly commend to you, go online, Capital Institute, download John's paper, Regenerative Capitalism. John and I argue all the time, and yet it's the best I've found in 40-odd years of looking. We're an interesting species, yeah? We make up a story, and then we think it's graven truth. handed down on stone tablets. It's not, it's just a story. We made it, we can make a different one. Pete Seeger said the key to the future of the earth is finding the optimistic stories and letting them be known. So a group of us started getting together about 4 years ago to try to build this new story, this new narrative. Here's where we've gotten to. That true freedom and success depend on creating a world where we all prosper and flourish. That institutions serve us best when they recognize our individual dignity and enhance our interconnectedness. And that if we're going to thrive, we have to pivot toward this new purpose of shared well-being on a healthy planet. This is our effort to date at a new narrative. If any of you can wordsmith it, we'd love that. We're working with some of the best marketers in the country, people who were at Ogilvy and Edelman, a gal who now runs Futerra, at doing the kind of massaging and messaging that the neocons did with their message. But the basic truth is we are not fated to collapse. We have all the technologies we need to solve all the problems facing us. And it's happening. Renewable energy, just this week, I was just telling Bill Becker, who runs the Presidential Climate Action Project, just this week, just today, the International Energy announced, renewables are now providing more generating capacity than coal. Wow. Big wow. Just this last year, renewables have soared up. Over 100 companies have pledged to be 100% renewably powered. This man, Tony Seba, Stanford professor, says inevitably, because of 4 things, by 2030, the world will be 100% renewable energy, not just electricity, but energy. The 4 things are the fall in the cost of solar, fall in the cost of batteries, electric cars, self-driving cars. The utilities either will adapt and come along with this, or they will die. Little Tesla sells 300 times fewer cars than General Motors, has half the market capitalization of GM. Why? What business is Tesla in? Batteries. Bingo. It's a battery company. You get the same drop in the cost of storage, and renewables become fixed firm power. Agriculture. We need to roll climate change backwards, and we actually know how to do this. You start with efficiency in renewables, cut the emissions, but then you suck the stuff out of the air and put it back in the soil where it's supposed to be. How? Trey will talk a bit more about this. His boss, Alan Savory, has a brilliant TED Talk that I also commend to you on why regenerative agriculture, holistic management of grazing animals, is the key to solving the climate crisis. Here's what it looks like. Looking north, looking south. South is holistically managed. North is conventionally managed. Gabe Brown, North Dakota corn soybean farmer going broke, shifted to regenerative agriculture. He is now profitable, and he has taken his soil from 1.3% soil organic matter, which is carbon, to on some plots 11% soil organic matter. He's recarbonizing the soil. When you do this, you're rolling climate change backward. And it's what customers want. Cows were never designed to eat corn. When you feed them corn, they get sick. When you allow them to eat grass, they provide the healthiest protein around, and are part of the solution to climate change. This regenerative agriculture is being practiced at places like the Land Institute. The native wheat, a perennial wheat called Kernza, is now the feedstock for Patagonia's beer, long root ale. And you can see the difference in how deep the root structure is compared to our hybrid wheat. Oh, but you can't possibly feed the world on this stuff. We need industrial agriculture. Well, no. UNCTAD 3 years ago, came out with a report saying only smallholder organic agriculture is capable of feeding the world because it already provides 70 to 80% of the world's food. So what, we're going to change all of that to industrial ag? No, it's much simpler to take the little bit that's industrialized and killing us and shift back to holistic regenerative agriculture. When you do all of these things, and I've only touched on 2 of a whole array of opportunities that are now available to us, when you do this, you create more jobs. Per dollar invested in energy efficiency, renewable energy, you get 10 times the number of jobs of investing in central station power plants. Occam Steiner, who has been running UN Environment Program, Pavan Sukhdev, running Corporation 2020, are laying out how these are the jobs of the future. Young people in the room, do you guys want to work for a dirty company? Hands up. And it's happening. Sustainability is breaking out everywhere. Whether it be reports in Harvard Business Review, or my friend Yvonne getting the cover of Fortune, or God save us, the evil empire going green. Trust me, when Walmart goes green, there's a business model. Those wild-eyed environmentalists at Goldman Sachs, the companies that are leading in environment, social, good governance policy, have 25% higher stock value. Carbon Disclosure Project, the companies that are leading in measuring and monitoring their carbon footprint and embedding sustainability into their business model, have 18% higher return on investment than the laggards, 67% higher than companies that refuse to measure and monitor their carbon. Again, this is what young people want. Overwhelmingly, young people want to be a part of this new economy. Can it happen? As a world, can we shift? In the last year, 3 amazing things happened. We got the Sustainable Development Goals unanimously approved by the United Nations. A number of us were in Paris for the Paris Climate Accords. I wear on my hat the pin from Kyoto. We've been trying ever since 1997, and this year we got it. We have a global agreement on carbon. And just last week, the Kigali Accords, bringing up to date the Montreal Protocol. Again, essentially universally acclaimed by all of the nations that were participating. The nations of the world are starting to work together on this stuff. The age of fossil is over. Now our job is to build a regenerative economy, a regenerative society. To do that, we need a new narrative that tells us, how do we make the world work for 100% of humanity? We had an old narrative. They were very successful. And we are working off the theory of change that whatever works is possible. They did it. They transformed the global economic paradigm. We are now building what we call the Meadows Memorandum, after Dana Meadows, the gentle soul who gave the world the phrase sustainability, who wrote the book Limits to Growth. Here's where we've gotten to: a new narrative, which I showed you, the theory of change, of build this alternative story. We've got these working groups. There are people from around the world joining on Slack, in Zoom conversations, working on how do we transform culture, business, finance, education, the political system, civil society, ourselves and our consciousness, and the media. I think a finer future is possible. William Gibson said the future's already here, it's just not widely distributed. This is our job. A world that works for 100% of humanity, ensuring the dignity of all people. Again, we've got all the technologies we need. Doing this will unleash the greatest wealth the world has ever known. But it does require this vision. Who's responsible? This is my favorite Not My Job award. You'd have think somebody had picked up the darn possum. This is where we all are. The world is waiting for us to change it. Pick up the possum. Sylvia said, what we do in the next 10 years matters more than what humanity does in the next 10,000. So I'm deeply grateful to each one of you that you have chosen to spend your evening with us, engaging in this journey. It's going to take people in community thinking about what does this mean for me, for my life, for my home, for my neighborhood, for my city, for my state, for my region. Ultimately, my nation. If any of you haven't yet voted, goddamn it, go vote. This time it really matters. And we have the ability to do everything that's needed. Time is short. We're in a horse race with catastrophe. Good news, we're in the race. Thank you very much.
I can't tell you what it means to be able to be on the eve of my the second half of my hopefully more than a century on this planet, to be talking about the issues that are most meaningful to me and to be with all of you, talking about such really scintillating and important conversations. I'm so honored to be here. I mean, what an incredible group of minds. I think Hunter shared with us a lot of the elements of modern day capitalism that are leading to what could be us as humanity, as a species, on the brink of collapse. But capitalism, which is kind of the source of a lot of the things that are facing our planet, has brought many great things to humanity, right? Higher standards of living, higher levels of education, more democracy, more freedom. It's also brought to us, as we talked about with hyper-consumerism, too many choices. We have more than 15 flavors of ranch dressing on this shelf at the local Safeway. And is it any wonder, as a result of that, we have epidemics of stress and anxiety, and then we have all of these other externalities, right? These things that Hunter alluded to that capitalism is causing. And then we've got this incredible amount of greed and scandal that would make Genghis Khan blush. And we've got greenwashing. We've got the folks that say they're green, and they think they're doing sustainable practices, but really they're just doing things that are slightly less bad. Add to that, we've the notion of shareholder primacy, which basically says by law and by custom that the duty of the corporation is to maximize shareholder value, usually at the expense of other stakeholders. So we've got effectively system failure, and system failure is going to lead to economic collapse of all of our systems. And I think Hunter did a great job of sharing what those leading indicators are that says that we need to do something pretty radical. And it requires system change. We're talking about that tonight, just the ideation of what's possible. What does regenerative really look like? What does restorative look like? How can we create that together? How can we create that in our individual businesses? What if we could harness the power of business, which has been used to create so much destruction, to actually create this long-term prosperity that we know is possible? What if we could shift the mindset of new businesses, for example, and some of our multinationals to change how they do business? What if we could start celebrating companies that are using their business as a force for good, that are actually not only the best in the world, and they get awards for that, but they're the best for the world? What if our leading business people understood the true purpose of business? That is to solve problems, not to line someone's pockets. What if we could have our multinational CEOs realize that they have a lot more power than they think they do? Sorry, I'm on auto advance. Does anybody know how to stop that? Huh. Yeah, to keep talking faster. Like Paul Pullman. He's a freaking global hero. I'm sorry, this guy, to be able to challenge quarterly reporting and to eliminate or to step away from the terrorist notion of shareholder quarterly reporting is pretty enormous. And it's enabled them. Unilever has made a public commitment to become a certified B Corp within the next 20 years. What if our startup entrepreneurs could understand that they need to bake purpose in from the get-go, and they need to drive stakeholder interest into the legal DNA? What we're seeing is an historic global shift. We are seeing business leaders who get that they have a lot more power than we've been told we have. And we're seeing what's nothing short of the evolution of business. We're seeing a new form of capitalism arising. And I want to share with you some really two inspirational stories, but there's so many more I could share with you tonight. And what this new form of stakeholder-based capitalism is saying is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can create shareholder wealth, which is great, by the way. We like shareholders, we like investments, but we can also take care of the other stakeholders in our midst. This isn't some newfangled hippie idea, by the way. Henry Ford was talking about a living wage 100 years ago. He understood that his company was going to do better if he was taking care of his employees. Not only that, but they could maybe afford to buy one of his cars. So I'm really fortunate to be able to work for this global organization called B-Lab. We serve a global movement of people who are actively using business as a force for good. They understand what the true purpose of business is. We have a network of global partners around the world that are trying to accelerate this cultural shift that's really in its nascency. The model behind this movement is to build a community of leaders, to elevate those companies that really get the purpose of business and are actively striving to build in restorative and regenerative practices into how they do business. And then to create tools, use these stories and create tools to make it easier for other companies to get on that path. It's great that we have Patagonians and we have Unilevers, but how does a regular business, a moving company in an inner city, think about this? How do they start making changes? And then we want to inspire billions of consumers to get out of the notion that they have to keep buying more shit. So we've been building in this movement of leaders, and we think of this as kind of a big climb up a big mountain. At the top of this is shared and durable prosperity or well-being for all. And the companies that are leading the way is this really small, kind of elite group of companies, and they're not perfect. They know they're not perfect. They know they have a long, long way to go on this journey, but they're piece by piece trying to figure it out. And then we're inviting people onto that climb by showing them the way and giving them tools to start measuring and changing their impacts. Thankfully, especially millennials, consumers are asking for better. They want better. They don't want to just buy an organic apple. They want to know how that apple was grown and who picked it and how were the employees treated and what kind of company is that grew your apple. So B corporations are what I've been talking about. How many of you have heard of certified B corporations? Awesome, about 3/4 of the room. I shouldn't be surprised by that. How many B corporations are in the room? Oh, yes, awesome. New Resource Bank. What's your bank? What's your company? Fabulous, a public benefit corp, awesome. Not a certified B Corp yet. You can get there, but you have chosen an awesome legal path to considering stakeholder interest, fantastic. And Compass Natural, soon to be, also Best Organics. And Namaste Solar's here, awesome. So these companies are meeting verified high levels of social and environmental performance. They're transparent about their practices. They know they're not perfect. They're willing to share lift the hood and say, listen, here's where we're doing well, here's where we really suck. Please help us get better. And they're accountable to their stakeholders. They take an online assessment that's free. It's available to anybody. You can get on there tonight if you want to create an account. The information you put in there is confidential. You can use it as a management tool to start building these practices into your business. And the cool thing is when a company realizes where they are and they start comparing themselves to 50,000 other companies that have taken this assessment, they realize how far they have to go and they start changing. They start building better practices into how they show up in the world. Maybe that's the competitive spirit in us as humans. Yeah. Yeah. So we now have over 1,900 certified B Corps around the world in every sector imaginable, everything from multi-billion-dollar conglomerates to sole proprietorships to over 50 countries and every sector imaginable. And it's many of the brands that you pick up and admire and say that these are your favorite brands every day. And it's lots that you have never heard of, law firms and engineering firms. So I want to share with you 2 examples. One that's here in our right in our backyard, New Belgium Brewing. So New Belgium, everybody knows New Belgium and loves New Belgium, Fort Collins-based brewery. They make amazing beer, right? Their product is freaking awesome. And they are ruthlessly, deeply committed to building a sustainable business from an environmental standpoint, and they also recognize that they have a long way to go before they achieve that. They've built some renewable energy both into their Fort Collins. They have a huge solar array in their Fort Collins brewery. They've built an array into their new Asheville, North Carolina. They are capturing biogas. They have retrofitted most of their buildings to use recycled materials. They have CFLs and energy conservation throughout all of their operations. They think really carefully about this, and it's a highly empowered employee base that's constantly thinking about how to do it better. It's not just some weenies at the top saying, oh, we should probably put some CFLs into the, no. They're like, wow, we want to think about how to use less. And then when we use less, we want to take whatever we had to spend on the traditional energy and put it into better things that are more on the restorative and regenerative end. If you haven't had a chance to go up there, by the way, get a tour. It's so inspiring about what the power of business really is to change the world. They're also really good at measuring this. You cannot manage what you don't measure. Corporations can't just say, oh, I'm doing a recycle now. How do you get better if you have no idea what your baseline is or what your trajectory is? Where do you want to be in 5 years? So the best companies in the world that are getting better at this, honestly getting better at this, are measuring it. They also have so we talked about conserving and creating energy. We talked about the renewables. That's the solar array in Fort Collins. They're also accounting for their greenhouse gases, and they're trying to make amends for it in a wide variety of ways. They also understand place and what it means to draw water out of a river and turn it into beer. And so a lot of the work that they do around conservation and protection is specifically about the Poudre River, right in their backyard. And when they stand up for conservation causes, often it has to do with river environments. Yep. Yep. Now, they also happen to be employee owned. So Kim Jordan and her husband were the founders, and they built this awesome company. It's almost $500 million now. And I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, they converted to a employee-owned company. And at first, Kim kept majority share, and recently she gave the rest of it back to the employee base. So they understand not only their role in terms of how they impact the environment, they understand their role in Fort Collins and in Asheville as a member of the community. They understand that they are one of the anchor companies and institutions in a city that needs them to be there, and they want to build the wealth and the prosperity of that place that they call home. They also are a certified B Corporation, and they actively work to be in community and communication and to collaborate with other B corporations, because they know when they support other companies that are honestly on this journey, that they're going to elevate the movement, they're going to speak with a stronger voice, they're going to get consumers to start choosing better. And this is just some of the examples. They have 2 collaborations in the last 2 years. One is a really cool beer that they did with Patagonia, also a certified B Corp, and a beer that they did with Ben & Jerry's, a ice cream beer. They also did a really cool beer with 13 other B Corps last year called Brew the Change that used a B Corp hops, a B Corp mate company, a B Corp cranberry company. Sounds kind of disgusting so far, but I swear to you that it's really good. And then I think 11 breweries that actually made the recipe together and then distributed it through their own distribution routes. And lastly, they really are a company that understands how they are successful because of these practices, not despite them. And they're having a lot of fun doing it. So the other company I want to share with you is a company called Greyston Bakery. How many of you have heard of Greyston Bakery? Awesome. This is an amazing company in Yonkers, New York. They've been around since 1982. They are owned by the Greyston Foundation, also an unusual model. And they make the brownies that go into Ben & Jerry's brownie ice cream. Is that what it's called? Brownie ice cream. How many of you had that? Okay, this is the quality of this. It's fantastic. Okay. They also are a world-class company along regenerative principles. And I'm going to share with you a video that I think tells the story a little bit better than I can. There we go. Sorry, I think you're going to get a short. Yeah, skip ad. Oh, come on now. Here we go. Oh, that's a good sign. Should have downloaded the video. Here we go.
So the model's pretty simple. The doors that you all came in today to get to the bakery are the same doors that people come through. They put a name on them.
Put your mic down towards the
On the list. And when we have a job available, we take the next person off the list and we give them an opportunity.
Ever since I can remember my mom's work, she did 2 jobs in one for years and couldn't provide for her family. I didn't see things getting better, so at the age of 14, I started selling drugs. I just felt as though I had to do what I had to do to help my family. You know? I was back and forth from jail. I sold drugs to females that was pregnant, to people I know, moms and fathers. Just picturing that, like, man, what we were doing. We was bringing down our own community. I didn't like the person I was. And I wound up doing 4 years. In jail, I had a whole lot of time to think and reflect on life. I knew life wasn't about being in a cell. It was time. It was time to change my ways. I came home with nothing. I was dying. If I was looking for employment, nobody would hire me. I went through weeks and weeks of rejection. And a friend had reminded me about Greyston, the bakery, with that open hire process. I put my name on a list for a job. One day I was riding around with my friend. I got a call like, "You want to come to work?" I can't lie. My first day at work, I was excited. I seen people that I knew. They was encouraging me because we all been through the same things. It was like, basically like being back on the block. I went from apprentice to lead operator and research and development. Now, recently, I just got promoted to supervisor training. I never thought that the baby would do this for me. I started my own family. I had my first child. It's crazy. I came home with nothing. I died. My mother and brother was holding me down. And 6 years later, to be in a position that I'm in, I'm not rich, no, but I'm happy. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm happy. Hi, baby. Everybody deserves a second chance. We gotta get to know people. When you give a person a job, you give a person a second chance at life.
One of my favorite memories was when we had launched our cookie product at Whole Foods. And we had made the decision to put team pictures on the brownies. And two of our team members were together at a holiday party, and one of them was already on a pack of cookies. And the other one said, hey, you know, I'm going to be on the next package. And they looked at one another and they said, can you believe that 2 years ago we were in jail together? That was awesome.
That is a great company. So I look at these principles and I say it's possible for us to change this system. And you can be doing that through every dollar you spend and through the companies that you work for. We can change how capitalism creates prosperity for our planet and restores our environment. Thank you.
So because Hunter is so intimately involved with what we're doing, you've seen some, put this up here, you have seen some of the examples that show the difference between what we would consider degenerative agriculture and regenerative agriculture with some of the fence line photos. And if you've seen Alan's TED Talk, it has been a very famous TED Talk over the last few years in being able to give examples of what a regenerative agriculture could look like. Now, what's interesting is Alan Savory, the organization being his namesake, is very focused on what it means to be regenerative, but not just in the agricultural space. And so what Alan discovered and what he created back in the late 60s, early 70s, and continued to refine and improve was a decision-making framework based on the idea of holism. And that it was holistic thinking and decision-making that just applied in an agricultural setting creates significant changes in outcomes. And so what we've done in the agricultural sector has been something that we've embraced and continuing to use as a framework into how decisions are made in all aspects of society. So we spend time with agricultural businesses, we spend time with governments, with NGOs, with organizations like yourself that are not necessarily based in an agricultural setting, but if practicing in a regenerative way will have significant influence on regenerative practices, both in a organizational setting as well as in a true agricultural setting. So the Savory Institute in its form today was created in 2009, and we are about large-scale of the world's grasslands. One of the things we started to do was immediately, I came on board in 2010 with the idea of helping to inform what our business model as an organization is going to be in the future. And we came to the conclusion that we were going to be a part of building a regenerative network. And that was back in 2010 that we made that decision. And this network was going to be self-organizing, was going to be holistic, was going to be regenerative. It was going to have all the things that we've been talking about today in the very essence of how it was created from the very beginning. And it was going to be local. It was going to be locally led, locally managed, and inspired to give examples of what it means to be regenerative in places around the world. So here's just a few examples of a few people and places that we are in. Currently, we're in 22 different countries. We have 30 plus organizations that are practicing this in what we call our Savory Hub model. And that is really focused on these two these areas are where we are, but really focused on specifically creating these kinds of results. So just since 2013, we've influenced 6.5 million hectares of land, which is 18 million acres, roughly. And we have trained 3,100 people in these regenerative practices. It has created a significant amount of impact in the communities, on the land, in the economies, and just in the livelihoods of the people who have been a part of these things. And just to make the connection to what Hunter was saying earlier, we estimate, and this is from Ratan Lal and others who are carbon scientists, soil scientists, recognize that for every hectare of land that we influence where we increase the soil organic matter by 1%, that it can sequester up to 27 tons of carbon per hectare. So all you have to do is do the math. 6 million in terms of hectares influenced times 27 tons shows you the opportunity of sequestering carbon. So we really feel like these regenerative practices have the opportunity to actually do the things that most sustainable and doing good practices can't do, which is actually fix what has happened over many centuries. Some people talk about over the last few decades. The reality is it's not a decade issue. Agriculture has been creating some of the issues that we've been having to deal with for over 10,000 years. And it's now making changes in those practices that's creating the opportunities. Tons. Carbon per hectare, per year. That's correct. And we can send you more information on that. But we actually see this regeneratively in the fact that it's not siloed. This is not segments that we're dealing with. It's dealing with wholes, both of culture, of livelihoods, of actual impact on the ground. So we see climate change mitigation as a part of this, water security, food security, and decreased poverty. Now, one of the things that the Savory Institute is one of only 11 organizations that was identified by the Virgin Earth Challenge as having a viable option to address climate issues. And we are one of those finalists as a part of that challenge, one of 11 for a $25 million prize. And we are one of just 3 biological solutions versus technology solutions. And the fact is our issues going forward today are biological issues that we need to address. They're biological at-base issues. And as Alan has famously said on his TED Talk, there isn't a church, there isn't an organization, there isn't a government that's not built on soil. So if we don't address soils, you're not going to be able to address the calamities that we've created over the many years that we've existed. So it's a big deal. So for us, the Savory Hub, and I'm just going to specifically talk about the hub network that we've created. And I'm going to read these 2 statements to you. The vision statement: to be a regenerative community of local entrepreneurial organizations facilitating the regeneration of land, people, and local communities. That's what we're about. And the mission is to build a global network of these local hubs, 100 plus of them by 2025, influencing 1 billion hectares of land by 2025 through offering these regenerative programs to farmers, landowners, governments, and NGOs. It is a big-ass goal. It is as big as you can possibly get. And the reason we chose this, 1 billion hectares, is we did the math. And we said we wanted to be inspired by the math, inspired by the grandiosity of the vision, which is 1 billion hectares of 5 billion grasslands that exist. If we do the math of the 1% soil organic matter on 1 billion hectares, that it will bring the carbon load down to pre-industrial levels just by managing soils regeneratively. Yeah, yes. Say it one more time. 1 billion hectares of land being able to sequester carbon, 1% soil organic matter, which will sequester carbon, will be able to bring the carbon load down to pre-industrial levels. And we feel like we will continue to show enough evidence that we'll get real legitimate funders to fund those activities, from governments to foundations to individuals who recognize that not only are we going to pull the carbon load, we're going to feed people, right? We're actually going to enhance economies as a result of it. So it's not compromising one for the other. And that is truly what regenerative is, and it is about. One doesn't get compromised. It is a whole within wholes. So nothing in that process can be compromised for it to be truly regenerative going forward. So I just want you, a lot of information, a lot of the things you get is informationally driven and positioned. The fact is this is all a movement of people. This is just some of our hub leaders and around the world that have come to where we do some of our trainings when we're continuing to support hubs and places, and this is in Zimbabwe. So a couple of regenerative insights for us that inform what we do as an organization. And some of these things you've talked about already, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, and know that I'm at the end, so I need to speed up. So what informs our understanding of regeneration? Living ecosystems. We are informed by it. We study it. We continue to use that as an opportunity to learn how we should behave in social systems in creating something that truly will regenerate something of importance going forward. We believe they're complex. They are holistic. It's a network. They're recurring. It's self-organized. It's intelligent. And one of the most important things of regenerative is the health of the whole is not understood or managed through the lens of a single species or node. Now, I want to repeat that one because to me that's so important. Health of the whole is not understood or managed through the lens of a single species or node. There are so many different variables. There are so many different wholes within wholes that in our society and in our complex systems, focusing on one creates unintended consequences in others. So it has to be seen as a whole, has to be managed as a whole, and has to be positioned for that going forward. And so when we talk about some insights into what that is, as we're looking at some other regenerative heroes around the world, is what does it look like? So in managing regeneratively, we recognize it's about measuring and managing a regenerative framework and process. So let's use another word that I think everybody here can understand. It's the underlying ecosystem. So when we talk about how we change the results of land from degenerative to regenerative, we manage water, we manage the mineral cycle, the water cycle, we manage community dynamics, and we manage the energy flow. That's what we manage. The outcomes are a result of a healthy ecosystem. In a society that we live in today, we tend to focus on the outcomes and push backwards. The fact is we should be managing and measuring the framework and continuing to move in that direction. Outcomes are naturally recurring results from a regenerative framework, and decision-making, organizational decision-making frameworks will need to be restructured and holistic. You are not going to be able to, I use this from a theological standpoint, you're not going to be able to put new wine in old wineskins. It will burst. It's just not going to work. We're kidding ourselves if we think our current structures are going to handle regenerative principles and outcomes. We're all going to have to use one another, lean on one another to rethink how our organizations make decisions, how they're structured, and how we're going to go forward. Because what stymies the opportunity and the innovation of what we're talking about here is because great things happen and then they go into an organization and nothing comes out of it. Right? So, the Savory Institute is about this, and I'll close on these things. It's all about these animals, right? Managed holistically to create a regenerative outcome. It's about these cowboys in Chile. our hubs around the world, our Maasai in the Mara, our Turkish brothers, our African communities in the Wangi community in Zimbabwe, Sazinda, and the farms that they're creating. In Georgia, Will Harris, some of you may know. And even great world leaders that are influencing this moment. Thank you.